Hello, and welcome to one more video of the series Top Test Automation Interview Questions with Answers. So, folks, if you haven't watched the previous videos, I would strongly recommend that you start from part one or the video one of the playlist and then come back to this video. And for folks who have already watched the previous videos, let's continue. And yes, if you haven't subscribed yet, please go ahead and share it with your folks as well. I think these questions can be very helpful to you. And of course, if you want us to create more relevant data as per your choice, feel free to comment. So yeah, coming back to the question. Uh, the first question for this video, or question number 31 for the entire question bank, is if encountered with iframes, how would you handle these in Selenium, right? So it's a four-step process, starts with code search. What happens in code search? For an example, this is a website, and I'm in the code base for this, and I'm going to search for the keyword here, which is iframe, right? So if you've encountered this iframe keyword in the code base, it means that there are some iframes on this web page, and whichever. So let's suppose if you want to navigate to this is a sample page line on the web page, you right click on this, and maybe when you use your normal XPaths to encounter to this simple H1, you might not do that. The reason being that there's already an iframe inside which this particular H1 is encapsulated. So the trick is that first you have to switch into the iframe here, the current node, focus on the current node, and then you run your your regular XPath, right? The drill is, first of all, you have to focus on the code search. Secondly, you have to step inside the frame. So use the method driver.switch to dot frame, whichever frame you want to enter into. And then once you're in that frame, then you perform your usual actions, right? And mind you, an iframe is basically a box within a box, right? So this is the bigger box, the parent box, and this is a smaller box, the gray one. This is a smaller box, right? So the drill is that you first switch from the bigger box into the smaller box, which is the gray one here. You do the needful, you want to access the H1, perform any actions, and then you have to exit out again. Because if let's suppose the other actions are going to happen on maybe this particular text, or maybe this particular button, or anything for that matter, right, which is outside the box, again, it is going to throw an error, right? So the simple steps are, first of all, do the code search. Secondly, step inside the frame. Third, perform your actions. And then fourth, exit from the frame. That's the drill, right? So these are four steps you have to do. If you want to know that how iframes are to be handled, I mean the exact explanation, there's a playlist that is Salesforce automation testing. It's quite famous on our channel, quite viewed on our channel. So therein we take you from beginner to advanced level. So go and watch that playlist. Therein there's a video wherein we talk about handling iframes as well. Cool. So yeah. Let's jump on to the next question. What is the significance of test engine Selenium? So there are multiple pointers which show you the significance. The first being enhanced organization and readability. That is, you have the concept of annotations and grouping in TestNG that basically increase your readability of the project and organizes is better. Point number two, powerful features for efficient testing. That is, you have the concept of data-driven testing. You have the concept of parallel testing. It allows you to run your tests parallelly. Then it allows you to sequence your tests, and you can sort of correlate or make dependencies within test cases that help you to optimize your executions. That is the second pointer of significance of TestNG. The third pointer is improved reporting and debugging. That is, when you have TestNG in your framework, at that point of time, you will have the reports coming out after the executions. They're detailed. There is reason for every failure. There are errors, console logs, everything, right? The fourth point is there's a flexibility. That is, in your framework, there is always a flexibility to move code from here and there with minimal manual or repetitive effort required. Then last is open source. Open source, as you all know, uh, it's free to access. There are no ifs and buts. You just go and start accessing it, right? So the next time someone questions you that what is the significance of test engine Selenium, these are the answers you give. Let's go to the next question. What is the difference between WebDriver and web element, right? We hear these words a lot, that is WebDriver and web element, but what is the difference between them? So I have chalked down these differences on different categories. The first one, purpose. For a WebDriver, it controls the browser itself, whereas a web element, it basically represents an element on the web page. For example, this box, this text, this button, everything is a web element. Then scope. For a WebDriver, browser, window, or tab is the scope. For web element, it is the only specific element, right? So a WebDriver has the entire web page under its scope, whereas in a web element, it is only restricted to that button. For example, this button, web element is only restricted to this button slide, for example, right? Then third pointer, interactions. A WebDriver can open, close browsers, navigate to URLs, perform different actions, whereas a web element basically is I mean, the actions will be only limited to will be only limited to the actions which can be done on web elements. That is, you can enter data, you can click, but you cannot navigate to a URL per se. You cannot maximize, minimize windows, right? So any action which is other than the web element, or any action which is to be done on anything else other than the web element, that is not in the scope of a web element. It is in the scope of WebDriver. Then an example is it's as simple as in WebDriver, you have driver.get, right? So when you use driver.get, you're not using it on a web element per se. You are basically navigating to a URL. Whereas for a web element, you use the XPath and you use driver.findElement and so on. And then there are some methods, and honestly, get, navigate, quit, switch to, all these methods you're already aware, because if you're coming for interview questions, you know what these methods mean. If you don't, again, go to the playlist that I talked about, the Salesforce automation testing playlist on the channel, and that will help you. Then web element, that is, some methods under web element will be click, send keys, text, get attribute, as we talked about. Anything, any action which is limited to the scope of the web element and not the entire browser comes under the web element Selenium methods. Cool. Then, next question. Let me zoom it out a little bit. What is the relevance of Cucumber framework in Selenium? There are some pointers that make Cucumber framework so famous in the market right now. These 4 pointers are: number one, communication boost. That is, with Cucumber, everyone, that is, the testers, the developers, and even your boss can understand the test scenarios, no more confusion. That is, it's plain, simple English language, right? I don't want to deep dive into showing you the framework and all for now, but yes, the easy thing is that you have this English sort of a language which is readable and understandable by all. Then point number two, focus on what matters. That is, forget the code details. When you have this concept of feature file, step definition, and actions. So at the front end, there is only simple English language which talks about the test steps. The code and everything is at the back end. So you need not worry about, as a BA or as a manual tester or as a project manager, you need not worry about what is written at the back end. You need not worry about understanding what is written in the code. You just need to focus on the test steps. Everything is written at the back end. That is for the automation folks, right? Then living documentation. So this Grekken scenarios double as documentation. Again, we're just talking about the same point, but we're talking about the advantages of this Grekken or the English-like language. So when you have these test steps already written in plain English, you need not maintain a separate documentation. This one helps in itself, right? Then fourth is flexibility. That is, you prefer BDD or TDD. Cucumber works with both. That is, Cucumber is not only specific to BDD, it works with TDD as well. But if you ask me, it's a better choice to use Cucumber for behavior driven development or BDD. Cool. So these are some pointers that make Cucumber framework very much relevant and very much famous. Let's go on to the next question. What are the advantages of headless browser testing in Selenium? What is headless browser testing? You see this browser right now. I run my test case. The browser window opens up. Everything which is happening, all the actions navigating to URL on the web element, everything I'm able to see. In headless is the keyword. There is no browser visible to you. You run a test case, you execute it. Everything is happening somewhere on the back end on a report on a remote setup. You will not be able to see anything. So there are some advantages of it. First one, lightning speed. When you do not have any graphics to load, the execution speed of your test case will increase. Scale up, save big. That is, run tests on multiple machines or browsers at once, even without fancy displays. This saves resources. Again, if you have a lot of graphics to display, a lot of resources will be used. Then, automation rockstar. That is, see, in automation, there is no human, so you are not at all concerned about seeing those things in action. You're just concerned about execution happening and seeing the reports, right? So it's the best case for an automation tester. And cost cutting. Basically, testing mobile websites often require actual devices, which can be expensive. That is why headless testing is good for you. That is, if you want to run your tests on mobile, you will need to purchase those devices. Whereas using headless browser testing, you need not do that. You save a fortune on buying these resources as an organization, right? Now, of course, if something has advantages, it is bound to have some disadvantages as well. The first one being seeing is believing. So when we say that, okay, you need not worry about what is happening on the web interface, that is an advantage. But the disadvantage is that there might be some errors which can be better debugged when you have a look at what is happening in real time. You won't be able to see that. Secondly, debugging detective. That is, uh, you in order for you to debug anything, you will have to focus only on the error reports and you will not be able to see anything on the screen per se, right? Then, thirdly, JavaScript jitters. Some complex interactions which involve JavaScripts will not work quite right with headless mode. We are not sure why that happens, but that's sort of a flaw right now. Then, not everyone's invited. That is, older browsers or specific versions might not play nice with headless testing. So if your browsers are not up to date, or if the browsers that you're calling with your framework, if they're not up to date, then there might be some glitches, there might be some problems. Then lastly, security matters. That is, running tests on cloud platforms. If you are running them and if you are not very much sure about the security, it makes more sense that you only use the head sort of head based browser testing, because in such scenarios it doesn't make sense to use headless browsers. Okay, then the next question: how can you check if an element is displayed on the screen or not? So WebDriver basically allows us to check the visibility of the web elements, and there are numerous ways in which you can check the visibility of the web elements, like buttons or radio buttons and drop downs. uh, Let me just highlight it for your better readability. So there are three ways in which a button can be displayed. Number one, the method is displayed. Number two, the method is selected. And number three, the method is enabled, right? So all in all, uh, these three methods can be used to check whether an element is visible or not. Sometimes it might be you can check it using this displayed. Sometimes you need to check whether a checkbox is selected or not. So you need to use the method is selected. And sometimes you need to check whether this button or this text is grayed out or can be interacted with. Then it is enabled, right? So that's that. The next question is how to clear already input text in an input web element. So imagine that you have this input box. Maybe I'll try if I can find an input box here. Yeah. So if I say, let's say, if I enter data as reach taken more here, right? And I want to clear it out. I want to delete it. How do I do? In automation, you have this method which is clear. That is dot clear method. It's written here where my mouse is. So use this method in a code format like this, and you'll be able to clear your input box, right? Then the next question: how to delete all cookies in Selenium? Cookies and all these things is a big problem when you're testing in general as well. So it's a good idea to have a method in automation, and the method is as simple as dot delete all cookies, and it is going to delete all the cookies for you. Lastly, the last question for this video is going to be: what are a few scenarios that cannot be automated? This is important, guys. When you talk so much about automation, you should know that what sort of scenarios cannot be automated. Number one, bitmap comparison is not possible using Selenium WebDriver. Number two, captcha automation is not possible using Selenium WebDriver. And number three, wherever there are barcodes involved, and if you have to test barcodes, that is also not possible to test using Selenium WebDriver, right? So yeah, these are some questions, and there's going to be one more video wherein we are going to talk about more interview questions. That's going to be the last one for this playlist. There are going to be around 10 more questions. So I thought maybe I'll make a question bank of exact 50, half a century, and then I'll jump onto some other topic or some other category for video creation, right? So stay tuned, do watch the next video. And I think a question bank of 50 questions along with explanations is good for you to prepare for your first automation interview, right? So yeah, that's all. Thank you so much for watching and see you in the next video. Bye bye.